Hello and welcome to Anime Memories, and on this episode, I'm going to be talking about Desert Punk. Have you guys ever had a show that you really liked but for whatever reason, you push it to the side thinking that you'll come back to it later? And then 10 years go by and you say to yourself, I never got around to finishing that series, did I? This is what happened to me when I first watched Desert Punk. I got about halfway through and I was having so much fun that I decided to stop there and wait until I bought the DVDs before continuing. However, I never ended up doing that until recently. About 6 months ago, Funimation released the DVDs for $20 as a part of their save line, and since I'm such a cheap bastard, there's no way I could pass up such a good value for money. A decade is a long time though, and I've changed a lot. Many of the anime that I adored back then is stuff that I can't stand now. But for such a low price, I was willing to take that risk. So, let's get into it. Because of a large-scale nuclear war, the majority of Earth's vegetation was destroyed, leaving barren wastelands in its place. One of these wastelands is the Great Kanto Desert, where the remnants of humanity are trying to survive while being blasted by the desert heat. The extreme conditions are not the only danger that people of this world face, as there are many outlaw groups that are looking to take advantage of the shortage of law enforcement and profit off the weak. One of the few ways that people can protect themselves against these criminals is by hiring a mercenary, and one of the best mercenaries available is Desert Punk, a man who has gained a reputation of finishing any job no matter how difficult. I would usually start off a review by talking about the story, however, I need to talk about the sound first, since there's a few things about the voice acting that I need to warn you about. When the dubbing team was translating this, a lot of the dialogue was rewritten to include Western slang terms. This alone would be enough to frustrate purists, however, they occasionally go even further than that and change entire lines to something completely different.
You can take that question, cram it up your ass! Cram it up your ass! Up the ass!
Altering the original script could be sacrilege for some, so if you're that kind of person, the Japanese voice track and the subtitles appear to be intact, so you can just stick with that. But for me personally, I found that the English translation made it way funnier. The jokes in the dub were cruder and made me laugh more. Sure, there's some awkward line delivery and the voices of the background characters are usually pretty bad. However, it was worth sitting through all that for the hilarious script. To quickly finish off my comments about the sound, I liked how the music was primarily jazz and blues. It fits with the comedic atmosphere and Western setting. There's also a few scenes where the characters break out into song which were sometimes funny. However, they were mostly weird. I think that overall the soundtrack was used decently. The only time that I'd say it is bad is during this one scene with Tchaikovsky style music that was really unfitting considering what was happening.
What did you say? The only hole I'm interested in is the one you have between your legs that my kid's gonna come marching out of in about 9 months or so.
Okay, the background music is almost done. I just need to think about what song would go well with Desert Punk sexually assaulting a girl. Let's see here. No. That doesn't work. Hold up, Swan Lake. That'd be perfect. I have no idea what the fuck they were thinking. It seems so random. I wish I had a clever way to transition to the next section of the video from here, but I got nothing, so moving on to the story. If I was to describe this show in a sentence, I would say it's as if they took the world of Fist of the North Star and filled it with goofballs and morons. Along with acting like idiots most of the time, the characters frequently break the fourth wall and make multiple pop culture references. These kind of jokes would usually annoy me, mostly because every single crappy sitcom I've ever seen does them poorly, but they were clever here and they didn't feel forced, so I guess this showed me that I'm okay with referential humour as long as it's used properly. Another thing that would normally annoy me is using crude language for no reason other than trying to get some cheap laughs, and I'm not just talking about the harsh swears like fucking shit, they also make use of the third grade immature swears like dookie and fun bags. The reason why this didn't irritate me is that they never overused any of the words. There's a large variety in the vocabulary which kept everything funny, so everything was going along swimmingly. Then episode 5 and 6 hit, which was shockingly bad. The visuals seemed to take a downgrade, the timing of the jokes was awful, and Desert Punk had been likeable up to that point, started turning into this vile piece of shit. While the writing did go back to being great after these episodes were done, it didn't stay that way for long since the characters and the tone were fluctuating all over the place. Some of the episodes are completely silly and comedic, others include themes like child slavery, which isn't funny at all. Sometimes Desert Punk acts reasonably noble while being a borderline rapist at other times. It's as if 5 different writers worked on this, none of them spoke to each other, and the director just took everything they handed in, smashed it all together, and released it as a show. I think that this problem might be the result of the type of storytelling that this anime has. It's predominantly separated into 1 or 2 episode arcs similar to Cowboy Bebop or Black Lagoon. This style would usually fit really well with a comedy like this. It helps put the characters in new situations, keeping everything fresh. However, the episodic style doesn't help here because of how inconsistent it is. This wouldn't have been a hard issue to fix either. The humour is fantastic, all they had to do was keep everything funny and this series would have been awesome. But for some stupid ass reason they wanted to add in some drama, and with some of the juvenile lines in here, like referring to breasts as luxurious milk motels, you can't expect me to care when the characters start having an emotional moment. When this anime was embracing its stupidity, it felt alive, it had so much energy. Then when it switched to being serious, I would start looking around the room trying to find something more interesting to stare at. It became a chore to watch during those parts. Although even with all these flaws, it almost comes out to a net positive. It was so close to barely scraping by. But in the last 6 episodes, the creators decided to do away with the episodic arcs and instead try and tie everything together in one big story. In order to make room for this narrative, the jokes were cut way back, which is something that I usually respect. However, it's the worst thing that could have happened to this anime. Its humour was its biggest strength, and with it almost gone, the series is left with almost nothing. The last minute plot was predictable, rushed, poorly written, unconvincing, and had a horrible ending that made me feel like I wasted my time. Although, I appear to be in the minority here. After reading up on other people's reactions to the final few episodes, most of them seem to enjoy it, and while the opinions of the very last scene are somewhat mixed, overall there's a lot of positivity, so don't just take my word as fact. Look at what other people are saying as well. Now, when it comes to the protagonist, Desert Punk, I found him to be a lovable dickhead. While he's very strong and occasionally just brute forces his way to victory, I liked how he mainly uses his intelligence to win fights, often outsmarting his opponents through genius tactics. However, as I mentioned before, the writers sometimes make him too selfish, which turns him from a lovable dickhead to just a straight up dickhead. The defense I often hear for these horrendous asshole characters is that writing them like this is okay, as long as their horrible behaviour isn't rewarded, and that's what happens here. Desert Punk usually ends up getting screwed over somehow. I don't think this argument holds up, at least not for me, since when Desert Punk is at his best, when he was that endearing rogue that was making me laugh, I didn't want to see him get punished. It was so disappointing how he couldn't catch a break, and when he's at his worst, he's extremely irritating. It doesn't matter that his plans backfire on him, that doesn't bring me joy. All I wanted was for him to go away. Similar to the story, he's another casualty of the inconsistent quality of the series. Now, with the show being in an episodic format, the cast is primarily made up of a revolving door of recurring characters. While most of them don't make much of an impression, there are a few that I was always glad to see. There's Desert Punk's childhood friends, the Machine Gun Brothers, who were always funny, and a rival mercenary called Rain Spider, who was a joy to watch. He was one of the only parts of the finale that I actually liked.
That's not exactly what I see.
There's a body in my pants and everyone's coming!
In the visual department, it's mostly just average. The colours are dull yet acceptable for a post-apocalyptic series, and the animation is a bit lacking in certain areas. However, it's passable most of the time, so It's all fairly unremarkable, but decent enough not to be a problem. One of the few aspects of the artwork that impressed me were the designs of the armor. It wasn't only Desert Punk, every opponent he comes across has different Mad Max inspired attire. They were all really cool looking. I also thought that the desert cities were a great backdrop and allowed for many exciting scenarios with the action. Like with every element of this anime, the visuals have their flaws, however, the things that are great manage to even them out. While I enjoyed a good portion of Desert Punk, in the end I wish I hadn't gone back to it. The inconsistency and crappy conclusion ruined everything I loved about it. Again, my opinion is more on the negative side of the spectrum, so there's a good chance you'll like it more than I did, but I still wouldn't recommend it. There's a long list of comedies that are better and more worthy of your time. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment, and if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.